All right, hey there. So we're back for chapter 16 of Odd Thomas. When we left Odd, he was at little Ozzy's house right after the cow explosion, and he was sitting in the living room with Terrible Chester, the cat, and noticed the cat was having a real strong negative reaction to something outside, and he had looked out the window, and Fungus Man, Bob Robertson, was right outside in the yard, in little Ozzy's yard. So that's where we left it. So here we go, chapter 16. My first instinct was to duck back from the window. If Fungus Man was already following me, however, he must somehow suspect that earlier I had been in his house in Camp's End. My furtive behavior would serve to confirm my guilt. I remained near the window, but I was grateful that Terrible Chester stood between me and Robertson. I also found it gratifying that the cat's apparent intense dislike of the man, even at such a distance as this, confirmed my distrust of him. Until this moment, I would never have assumed that Terrible Chester and I would agree on any issue or have anything in common other than our affection for little Ozzy. For the first time in my experience, Robertson wore no smile, dreamy or otherwise. Standing in sunshine that the weight of the day had condensed from white glare into honey gold, backdropped by the forms and shadows of the laurels, he looked as grim as the giant photo of Timothy McVeigh on his study wall. From behind me, Ozzy said, "Oh God, that men should put an enemy in their mouths to steal away their brains." Turning, I found him with a tray on which he offered 2 glasses of wine and a small plate of cubed cheese surrounded by thin white crackers. Thanking him, I took one of the glasses and glanced outside. Bob Robertson was not where he had been. Risking a dangerous misunderstanding with Terrible Chester, I stepped closer to the window, looking north and south along the street. "Well?" Ozzy asked impatiently. Robertson had gone, and quickly, as if with an urgent purpose. As spooked as I had been to see this strange man at the picket fence, I was still more disturbed to have lost sight of him. If he wanted to follow me, I would submit to being tailed, because then I would know where he was, and knowing would rest easier. "Oh God, that men should put an enemy in their mouths to steal away their brains," Ozzy repeated. Turning away from the window, I saw that he had put down the tray and stood now with his glass raised as if making a toast. Struggling to recover my composure, I said, "Some days are so difficult that if we didn't let wine steal our wits, how would we sleep?" "Lad, I'm not asking you to debate the statement, merely to identify its source." Still rattled by Robertson, I said, "Sir?" With some exasperation, Ozzy said, "Shakespeare! I stacked the quiz to ensure you a passing grade, and still you fail. That was Cassio speaking in Act 2, Scene 3 of Othello." I was distracted. Indicating the window, where Chester no longer appeared to be agitated and had once more settled into a furry pile on the deep sill, Ozzy said, "The destruction that barbarians leave behind has a grim fascination, doesn't it? We're reminded of how thin is the veneer of civilization. Sorry to disappoint you, sir, but my thoughts weren't running that deep. I thought I saw someone I knew passing by." Raising the wine glass in his 5-fingered hand, Ozzy said, "To the damnation of all miscreants." "That's pretty strong, sir, damnation." "Don't spoil my fun, lad, just drink." Drinking, I glanced at the window again. Then I returned to the armchair where I had been seated before the cat hissed so alarmingly. Ozzy settled down as well, but his chair made a noisier issue of it than mine did. I looked around at the books, at the wonderful reproductions of Tiffany lamps, but the room didn't exert its usual calming influence. I could almost hear my wristwatch ticking off the seconds toward midnight and August 15th. "You've come here with a burden," Ozzy said, "and since I don't see a hostess gift, I assume the weight you carry is some trouble or other." I told him everything about Bob Robertson. Although I'd withheld the story of the black room from Chief Porter, I shared it with Ozzy because he has an imagination big enough to encompass anything. In addition to his nonfiction books, he has written 2 highly successful series of mystery novels. The first, as you might expect, is about a fat detective of incomparable brilliance who solves crimes while tossing off hilarious bon mots. He relies on his beautiful and highly athletic wife, who utterly adores him, to undertake all the investigative footwork and to perform all the daring do. Those books, Ozzy says, are based on certain hormone-drenched adolescent fantasies that preoccupied him throughout his teenage years, and still linger. The second series involves a female detective who remains a likable heroine in spite of numerous neuroses and bulimia. This character has been conceived over a 5-hour dinner during which Ozzy and his editor made less use of their forks than they made of their wine glasses. Challenging Ozzy's assertion that a fictional detective could have any personal problems or habits, however unpleasant, and still be a hit with the public as long as the author had the skill to make the characters sympathetic, the editor had said, "No one could make a large audience want to read about a detective who stuck a finger down her throat and threw up after every meal." The first novel featuring such a detective won an Edgar Award, the mystery genre's equivalent of an Oscar. The 10th book in the series had been recently published to greater sales than any of the previous 9. In solemn tones that fail to disguise his impish glee, Ozzy says that no novels in the history of literature have featured so much vomiting to the delight of so many readers. Ozzy's success doesn't in the least surprise me. He likes people, and he listens to them. And that love of humanity shines out of his pages. When I finished telling him about Robertson, the black room, and the file cabinets packed with thick case histories of homicidal maniacs, he said, "Odd, I wish you would get a gun." "Guns scare me," I reminded him. "Your life scares me. I'm certain Wyatt Porter would issue you a permit to carry a concealed weapon. Then I'd have to wear a sports jacket. You could switch to Hawaiian shirts, carry the gun in a belt holster in the small of your back." I frowned. "Hawaiian shirts are just not me." "Oh yes," he said with undisguised sarcasm. "Your t-shirts and jeans are such a unique fashion statement." "Sometimes I wear chinos." "The depth of your wardrobe dazzles the mind. Ralph Lauren's weeps." I shrugged. "I am who I am." "If I purchase a suitable weapon for you and personally instruct you in its use, thank you, sir, for your concern. But for sure I'd shoot off both my feet, and the next thing I knew, you'd be writing a series about a footless private investigator." "It's already been done." He sipped his wine. "Everything's already been done. Only once in a generation does anything as fresh as a vomiting detective come along." "There's still chronic diarrhea." He grimaced. "I'm afraid you haven't the knack to be a popular mystery novelist. What have you been writing lately?" "This and that." "Assuming this refers to grocery shopping lists and that refers to mash notes to Stormy Llewellyn, what else have you been writing?" "Nothing," I admitted. When I was 16, P. Oswald Boone, then a mere 350 pounds, agreed to judge a writing contest at our high school, from which he himself had graduated some years earlier. My English teacher required each of her students to submit an entry to the contest. Because my Granny Sugars had only recently died and because I'd been missing her, I wrote a piece about her. And fortunately, it won first prize, making me a minor celebrity in high school, although I preferred to keep a low profile. For my memories of Granny, I received $300 and a plaque. I spent the money on an inexpensive but quite listenable music system. The plaque and the music system were later smashed to bits by an angry poltergeist. The only long-term consequence of that writing contest had been my friendship with little Ozzy, for which I was grateful, although for 5 years he had harassed me to write. He said that such a talent was a gift, and I had a moral obligation to use it. Two gifts are one too many, I told him now. If I had to deal with the dead and also write something worthwhile, I'd either go stark raving mad or shoot myself in the head with that gun you want to give me. Impatient with my excuses, he said, "Writing isn't a source of pain. It's psychic chemotherapy. It reduces your psychological tumors and relieves your pain." I didn't doubt either that this was true for him or that he had enough pain to require a lifetime of psychic chemotherapy. Although Big Ozzy was still alive, little Ozzy saw his father only once or twice a year. On each occasion, he required 2 weeks to recover his emotional equilibrium and trademark good humor. His mother was alive too. Little Ozzy hadn't spoken to her in 20 years. Big Ozzy currently weighed, at a guess, only 50 pounds less than his son. Consequently, most people assumed that little Ozzy had inherited his obesity. Little Ozzy, however, refused to portray himself as a victim of his genetics. He said that at the heart of him was a weakness of will that resulted in his immensity. Over the years, he sometimes implied that I frequently inferred that his parents had broken a part of his heart that resulted in his mortal weakness of will. He never spoke of his difficult childhood, however, and refused to describe what he had endured. He just wrote mystery novel after mystery novel. He didn't speak of his folks with bitterness. Instead, he spoke of them hardly at all and avoided them as best he could, and wrote book after book about art, music, food, and wine. Writing, I told him now, can't relieve my pain as much as it's relieved by the sight of Stormy, or by the taste of coconut cherry chocolate chunk ice cream, for that matter. I have no Stormy in my life, he replied, but I can understand the ice cream. He finished his wine. What are you going to do about this Bob Robertson? I shrugged. Ozzie pressed me. You've got to do something if he knows that you were in his house this afternoon and already he's following you around. All I can do is be careful and wait for Chief Porter to get something on him. Anyway, maybe he wasn't actually following me. Maybe he heard about your exploding cow and stopped by to gawk at the ruins. Odd, I would be indescribably disappointed if, not having yet employed your writing gift to any useful purpose, you wound up dead tomorrow. Just think how I'd feel. I might wish that you'd grown wiser faster, get a gun, and write a book, but I won't wish anyone's life away from him. How swift are the feet of the days of the years of youth. Giving attribution to the quote, I said, Mark Twain. Excellent. Perhaps you aren't a willfully ignorant young fool after all. You used that quote once before, I admitted. That's how I know it. But at least you remembered. I believe this reveals in you a desire, even if unconscious, to give up the griddle and make yourself a man of literature. I expect I'll switch to tires first. He sighed. You're a tribulation sometimes. He rang his empty wineglass with one finger now. I should have brought the bottle. Sit still, I'll get it, I said, for I could fetch the Cabernet from the kitchen in the time that he would require merely to lever himself up from his armchair. The 10-foot wide hallway served as a gallery for fine art, and opening off of both sides of it were rooms rich with still more art and books. At the end of the hall lay the kitchen. On a black granite counter stood the bottle, uncorked to let the wine breathe. Although the front rooms had been comfortably air-conditioned, the kitchen proved to be surprisingly warm. Entering, I thought for an instant that all 4 ovens must be filled with baking treats. Then I saw that the back door stood open. The desert evening, still broiling in the stubborn summer sun, had sucked the coolness from the kitchen. When I stepped to the door to close it, I saw Bob Robertson in the backyard, as pale and fungoid as ever he had looked. Man. It's the end of chapter 16. Man. Fungus Man. Scary dude.